Hello and welcome to the Tempo Storm Deck Spotlight Series. In honor of the early passing of everyone's favorite legendary, Baku the Moon Eater, this week will feature the one and only Odd Warrior. Odd Warrior has been surviving since the release of Baku the Moon Eater. Odd Warrior has been a part of every meta since the Witchwood in some way or another. Like the earliest versions of Control Warrior, Odd Warrior implements the best defensive tools available to the class, such as Shield Slam, Brawl, and Reckless Flurry. However, for obvious reasons, all the cards in Odd Warrior must be of an odd mana cost. This restriction comes with the huge upside of having a hero power that gains 4 armor a turn instead of 2. For this reason, Odd Warrior has been a living nightmare for most aggro decks, as well as even a few mid-range and control decks. Due to how polarized a lot of Odd Warrior's matchups are, some players avoid playing it. While games with Odd Warrior can be very long, that can make them that much more rewarding. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel in order to stay in touch with our Hearthstone content. So without further ado, let's take an in-depth look at Odd Warrior. Many players would say that Odd Warrior's main win condition is fatiguing the opponent, both in the game and out of it. While this isn't exactly wrong, the most recent iterations of the deck have ways to kill its opponent before they hit fatigue. Some of the cards from Rastakhan's Rumble have given Odd Warrior a dragon package that can function both as a strong defense as well as a faster win condition. Cards like Crowd Roaster and Ember Scale Drake are great at keeping you alive, but they also can help to pressure out the opponent. In the end, Odd Warrior's main path to victory is still surviving. This deck has every answer in the book to stop early, mid, and late game aggression. And with the additional resources provided by Dr. Boom and Omega Assembly, you'll often be the only player left with any cards. Against aggressive decks, your game plan is to gain as much health as you can while dealing with all of their threats. With the upgraded hero power, you can safely take some damage, allowing you to greed out some of your removal. Odd Warrior's curve is designed to give many opportunities to squeeze in a hero power, so plan out your plays accordingly. Eventually, the aggro deck will apply enough pressure to where simply pressing the hero power button and ignoring their minions is no longer an option. This is where Reckless Flurry, Brawl, and Dynomatic come in handy. These cards are crucial for beating aggro decks, but be sure to use them efficiently since you have a finite number of them in your deck. This largely comes down to what's in your hand. If you have a few board clears in your hand, you can use them less sparingly. But if you have just one, perhaps consider taking a little damage to bait your opponent into overextending. Dynomatic and Stonehill Defender can also help you stall out long enough to get full value out of a board clear if your opponent is doing a good job at not overextending. In slower matchups, your strategy depends entirely on what type of slow deck you're up against. If the slower deck is looking to pull off a game-winning combo, then you're in a tough spot. Unless the combo is to deal a limited amount of damage where you can gain armor to stay out of range, you'll have to be the aggressor. The deck is obviously not designed for this, and it's definitely a long shot, but sitting there waiting to die is just the same as conceding. For the slower decks that function similarly to Odd Warrior, things become a little more complicated. While these matchups can be frustrating, they aren't unwinnable. Cards like Omega Assembly and Dr. Boom will generate enough value to give you an advantage in the late game. Just make sure to limit the amount of cards you draw in these matchups. In many cases, the game will be determined by who's ahead in fatigue and who has the last threat standing. Force your opponent to use removal inefficiently and play their threats into your removal. One way to get an edge later on is to find a way to gain value out of cards that are typically useless in these matchups, such as Brawl. Use these before a card like Shield Slam, which will always have a use. Finally, use your hero power as much as possible. A huge life gain going into fatigue will often in itself secure a win. While many of the cards in Odd Warrior are necessary for the deck to function, there are a couple of card slots that can be swapped out depending on the meta. Most lists are pretty tight, however, you can get away with cutting a few cards such as Eternium Rover, Dragonmaw Scorcher, or Crowd Roaster. If you feel that you need more value, you can cut out the Eternium Rover and Dragonmaw Scorcher for Harrison Jones and Elise the Trailblazer. If you're trying to beat a combo deck like Clone Priest, Tink Master Overspark is great at messing up their game plan. Ironbeak Owl is a well-rounded tech choice that can hit both slow and fast decks, but if you're already favored in these matchups, there's no need for it. Only include it for a matchup that is close or unfavored. Crowd Roaster can be removed if the check choice is meant to hit a faster deck, but avoid cutting 2 dragons since you will lose the consistency of having a dragon activator for cards like Emberscale Drake and Smolderthorn Lancer. Odd Warrior requires patience to play, but given its ability to grind out most decks, it can pay off with a high win rate on ladder. It's not long before we have to say farewell to Baku, so make sure to get your games in with Odd Warrior now. That's all for this Deck Spotlight video. If you enjoyed it and want to see more, make sure to subscribe to the channel. See you next time.